Well, all right. So we finished up 1 Samuel after many months. Yeah, we finished it up. We're about ready to go into the second.
Did I lead through it? I
Yeah.
don't remember going through chapter 31.
Yeah, we finished it.
Did we do chapter 31?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did 31.
Yeah.
Yes.
You remember?
And then,
So.
Then I must have missed more.
So okay, so we got to do a review for Sharon. So, all right, so somebody tell me before we start on 2 Samuel to this morning. Somebody tell me the big highlights of the last part of 1 Samuel.
Saul fell on his sword and his armor bearer.
Was that an accident?
No, he didn't.
Did it on purpose? Why would he do that?
Committed suicide because
Why?
he'd rather kill his own self than let the enemy kill him.
What's weird about that? What's so significant and strange that Saul, this king, would do that?
The Amalekite king he took captive.
Yeah, he didn't do that for other people. He made it a habit of capturing people alive and trying to make them do stuff, or hoping that he could make them do stuff. But then,
He didn't want to suffer that much.
yeah, so he just decided, all right, hey, you, kill me. And his armor bearer's like, what did he say?
Commit suicide.
Hey, why did he tell him no? His armor bearer told him no. Why?
He's afraid.
Huh?
He's afraid.
Well, fear's one motivator, but what was the big motivator as to why he didn't do it?
Well, Saul was his king.
Yeah, Saul was his king. That's what it was. He said, I can't kill the Lord's anointed, right? So, same thing that his armor bearer said the same thing that somebody else had been saying, right? Who else had said that before? David. Now David could have killed him several times, right? But why didn't he? Like, what are some of the reasons why David did not kill, other than being the Lord's anointed?
He was his king.
He was his king. And did he hate the king even though the king hated him?
No.
No.
Father of his best friend.
Yeah.
Father of his best friend,
His
and
father-in-law was his father-in-law.
yeah, exactly. So we see now. Where's David during this? Now wait, where does he fall on the sword at? Like, what's going on? Why does he have to fall on a sword to kill himself?
Because he was already so wounded.
He was wounded by what?
Like
By arrows.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, so they were fighting, but was this a small skirmish, just another battle, or was it a big battle?
A big battle.
Now, how do we know some of the things? How do we know that this was a big battle?
Well, the Philistines with Jonathan also, and Abinadab and Saul's sons.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big battle for one reason. Saul wouldn't have got hurt.
Yeah. Saul. Yeah.
Because he normally wouldn't have got injured that bad.
Right. Now, who else did? How many battles had King Saul's forces won? Or actually, I should say this: how many battles had King Saul's forces lost over the last 30 or more years?
Not very many.
They hadn't lost very many.
But
Why?
He said 10,000.
Saul's killed his thousands, and Saul's killed his thousands, and David's killed his tens of thousands. Now, so that gives you a pretty good indicator as to why Israel's forces had not really lost very much, if at all, since who came into the picture? David. Now, why does Saul lose? Well, he let his guard down, but
Jealousy brought him down a lot.
Mhm.
Jealousy from David.
he lost everything to David. But why does he lose this battle? Where's David's not even around, is he?
He's in
What?
sick lab.
Yeah. What were you?
He's lost favor with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. How do we know? What's one huge indicator that we saw the day before he died?
Oh, you mean talking about the witch of Endor?
Yeah.
Samuel?
What's the huge indicator that proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Saul has no interest in doing what God says, doing things God's way.
He had the opportunity to repent and make things right with God, because he was told, tomorrow you'll be with Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And we know Sam was causing death, that means he was dead, he died
Yeah.
tomorrow.
So now he knows. Now we know this guy ain't gonna be in heaven. Partially, well, I mean, definitely because he killed himself. But even if he had just died in battle, as he was told it was going to happen the day before, if he would have died in battle in a righteous state of spirit, like if he would have been spiritually pleasing in the sight of the Lord, then he could, died for the Lord's cause, then he would have, he would have had his reward. But if we do what we're supposed to do as Christians and we make it to heaven, we cannot expect to see Saul there. It's plain and simple. Plain and simple. Unless there's another part of the Bible that I'm not reading about. But now, what about Jonathan, his son? He was killed, but did he fall on his own sword? No, he was slain. No, somebody slew him. Now Samuel said, tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me. But what we're going to find out in 2 Samuel is there was another son that wasn't killed because he was not fit to battle.
Disabled.
Yeah, and we're going to find out why as well. And so, okay, so before we get into 2 Samuel, we've got to look at some of the we'll look at some of the introductory material. So we just finished up our wrap up of 1 Samuel. And so all of that information that we studied over the past few months, all of that flows right into this. And the whole what I'm hoping to get out of the study of these two books is that, at least something that I noticed, is that when I studied these two books, it helped me understand everything else in the Bible. The captivity of the Jews that happens after this, what led up to it, how did they get there, why did it happen, everything that happened after that, it makes sense when you look at this. The New Testament, all these references to David and Solomon and all these things, they all make perfect sense. Oh, and Saul, when you look at this, when you know about 1 and 2 Samuel, it unlocks a lot of the rest of the Bible, like understanding and stuff. So, all right. So this morning we'll look at. I hope you guys can see that there. There we go. I think that's good. All right. So we'll look at the author and the date of the writing. A lot of the same information, like author and when it was written. So for this book, it also fits for the first one. It was like it was written down consecutively. Samuel, one of the great judges and prophets, is where most of the Jewish tradition teaches that this comes from. Who wrote it? But since Samuel died, what's one of the problems with saying that the book of 2 Samuel was written by Samuel?
He died first.
He died in 1 Samuel. Okay, 1 Samuel 25. He could not have written the details of history prior to this, or after this. Like he couldn't have written about the things that happened after his death before he died. You know what I mean? And it's not like he's going to come back from the dead and then write. It's just, that's not the way it works. So it has to be someone else. It's very likely that Samuel did write some of the books of the Bible, like the book of Judges and the book of Ruth, and maybe some of 1 Samuel. But remember, he did die. He did die. And so you're not going to be doing a whole lot of writing after you're dead, are you, Zeke? Probably not.
No.
Let's see. And later prophets probably completed the end of 1 Samuel and all of 2 Samuel. We can reference 1 Chronicles and the kings and all these other things. So let's read this. Can somebody read this letter A right here real quick? First Chronicles.
In First Chronicles 29:29-30. Now the acts of David the king, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Samuel the seer, and the book of Nathan the prophet, and the book of Gad the seer, with all his reign and his might, and the times that went over him and over Israel and over all the kingdoms of the countries.
Okay, so what's interesting? So everybody's got their Bible today, right? So can somebody please turn to the book of Nathan and read that?
We don't have that.
You don't have a book of Nathan? Okay, so why would but that's from the Bible, right? This First Chronicles 29:29-30. That's from the Bible, right? But so then, what's this book? What's this book of Nathan the prophet here?
Was Nathan just the prophet?
Nathan was a prophet. He was, and we're gonna see him here in 2 Samuel very soon, as well. He's a key player in here.
Turn over to First Chronicles.
Well, that's what this verse says. I've got it copied and pasted right here. So go ahead, Frank.
We don't know that Nathan did write 2 Samuel. He could have.
That's what we're getting at. That's exactly what it is. That's the question. That's the answer to the question. It may not say, like, let's say Exodus or Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. Who were those written by? Moses. So they could, they have been called by people the books of Moses, right? Right? I mean, it's not something we hear all the time, but why would somebody be able to call them that? Because he put pen to paper, right? It's like the Harry Potter series. That's written by a lady named J.K. Rowling. That's the J.K. Rowling books, right? Or what's another famous book? Mark Twain. That's a Mark Twain. You can say that's a Mark Twain book, right? And people understand what you mean. So we see.
Well, it's like Moses wrote those books, but it's not really. It's gonna say Moses up there. It says Deuteronomy and all that.
Right.
Like he wrote those books.
Yeah, and we do.
That's the way it could be with Nathan.
That's what we're getting at. So now obviously Moses and a lot of these writers, just like in the case with Moses, how in the world would Moses know what happened at the creation of the world? God told him. How many years removed is this?
Quite a bit.
Yeah, and at least 1,000 or more. And so, so we see Nathan and Gad and all these other men who are potential candidates for being the ones who wrote this 2 Samuel. Even if they weren't there for every event, could they have, if the scripture proves itself over and over, then can we believe that they were inspired? Yeah. So, okay. Now, that's what it means by the book of Nathan the prophet. Okay, now it certainly appears that this passage identifies the writers of the two books of Samuel, as Nathan and Gad. Gad is the prophet named in 1 Samuel 22:5 and 1 Samuel 24:11-19. And Nathan is the prophet who works closely with David and is named 13 different times in 2 Samuel. And what's interesting about Nathan in 2 Samuel, if he is one of the ones that wrote this book, he would mention himself as doing some good things, but also making some mistakes too. So if it is him writing, and he's writing about some of the mistakes he made, like decisions he made, like he's going to tell David, he's going to say, yeah, the Lord says, yeah, go ahead, build the Lord a temple. It's great. It's a great idea. I'm glad you came up with that idea, David. But then later he's going to come back to David and said, actually, I spoke too soon. The Lord wants a temple, but he doesn't want you to build it. He wants one of your sons to build it. So, sorry. So Nathan will tell, well, if he is the writer, he is one who's humble. He's not too proud to admit when he was wrong. Okay. So, Samuel was a great man, serving both his people as a judge and as a prophet. Is considered to be the most important man in Israel between Moses and David. Why do we say between Moses and David?
Exodus.
Well,
The
Samuel.
freedom from slavery.
Samuel fits in the timeline right here, right? In between them, right? Because Moses was back in the day. Then his people started going away, and who brought them back? Samuel. And then what happened after Samuel? Did the people go away again, or did a leader step up and keep the people? Yeah, a leader stepped up, and who was that leader? David. Okay. So, Moses was the founder of the nation, and Samuel was its savior. Now, savior in a different context as what we would use for Christ, of course. Moses was the founder of the nation, and Samuel was what you could call, a hero. I wouldn't go as far as saying savior, but this is a commentary by one of the brothers in the faith, so I understand what he means there. But he's a hero for sure. His work bridged the time between judges and kings. Samuel was the last of the what for Israel?
Judges.
Right. And so Samuel, the man, bridges the gap between this group of judges and the beginning of these rulers. Because before Samuel, there was no king of Israel other than God, right? And you guys remember, why do they have kings now? Yeah, people wanted them, but why do they want them?
Be like the other nations.
Be like the other nations, and
Get more free.
kinda. They thought. Now, didn't they have a good leader in Samuel already? Now, did they cry out to make him king? No. Why? Or why didn't they want his sons?
No, I didn't want sons because the sons were corrupt.
Right. So then why not just make Samuel the king?
He was old.
He was too old. He was getting old, and they were worried. That's the whole point about why all this came up, is they were worried about, well, we love Samuel, but we don't want his son, so who's going to lead us? And so they said, all right, well, I guess we'll do this king thing like everybody else. Okay, he served Israel as his last judge and anointed the first two kings. So who was the first king that he anointed? And who is the second one that he anointed? David. Okay, so now we know a little bit about the background. Now let's look at what's the purpose, what's the point, the purpose of 1st and 2nd Samuel. All right, somebody read point number 1. Just read all of that real quick.
Purpose of the books of Samuel is to relate the account of the establishment of the monarchy and Samuel's part therein. Samuel was both a judge, 1 Samuel 7:6, 15, 17, and a prophet in 1 Samuel 3:20. He serves, therefore, to connect the period of the judges with early monarchy. Young, page 179, A, 1 Samuel 3:20. And all Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. B, 1 Samuel 7:6. And they gathered together the discipline and drew water and poured it out all those places. And his return was to Ramah, for there was his house, and there he judged Israel, and there he built an altar unto the Lord.
Okay. So, what's the first purpose of the books of Samuel? Like when we're thinking from what year is this? 2015. When we're thinking from 2015 back, and we open our Bibles and say, why is that there? What's the first point that we gotta get from it? What point does these two books serve in the grand history of the grand scheme of history? Yeah, it's a reference of what they did. It's a historical account. And what does it teach us about the history of God's people and nations in this world? What does it teach us? Yeah, that's true. Now, in the Bible context, this is like we talked about it a little bit this morning already. Like, it's really important. God had His way of doing things, right? He set up a system the way it was for a reason, right? He had the judges of Israel. They were not, they were leaders, but they were not the head honchos. They weren't where everyone looked to and followed that person like a dictator, like a king type thing, right? They were more or less like heroes of the faith, kind of. God was always the focus, was supposed to be the focus, the pinnacle leader of His people, right? During the system of the judges. Now, here's that system, and now we saw in First Samuel, we saw the problems that came with having a king, right? Like all the other nations. So 1 Samuel, now we're going to continue to see these problems. We saw in 1 Samuel the problems that come with having evil, corrupt kings. How power can corrupt anybody is what we're going to see in 2 Samuel. The first Samuel, we saw Saul, who started off as a good man, but he wasn't ready to be a leader. And we saw this good man fall and completely fall, not get up. 2 Samuel, we're going to see David, who is a good or a bad man. He's a good man overall. We're going to see that even a good man can sin. Yeah, sin. Even a good man can fall. Even a good woman can fall. But it's all about what when you sin, when you fall?
Having faith in the Lord, asking forgiveness.
Getting back up, right? So Saul in 1 Samuel, we saw he fell and didn't get up. He had no interest in it. 2 Samuel, a large focus is going to be on when David gets knocked down, he gets back up again through the Lord. All right, now this other writer named Charles Pledge, he gives some other purposes as well. It teaches what's a monarchy.
Kingship,
Yeah, it's a type of government, right? Like we have what kind of government here in America?
democratic.
A democratic republic, right? Where we vote on people to represent our ideals, right? Or, hopefully. But overall, it's a democracy. But what's a monarchy? Who else in the world, what's a famous country today that has a monarchy?
England.
Yeah.
English,
Yeah. Well, now,
Maybe not.
yeah. Now, so a monarchy is where you have, now we have a president of the United States here, right? And he has a lot of responsibilities. She would, if she had, if there's ever a woman voted in. That president position has a lot of responsibilities. But they delegate authority out, right? You're in charge of this. You're in charge of agriculture. You're in charge of trade. You're in charge of the Center of Disease Control. You're in charge of, whatever, right? He delegates out his power. Now, he doesn't have to sign off on every single thing that happens in the country. Now, what does a king or a queen have to do?
sign off
sign off on everything. Now we see these movies and we see these TV shows and read these books about all these, kings where they're sitting, or queens where they're sitting on their throne and they got all these lines out the door of peasants and farmers and stuff coming to beg and plead their case and say, "King, queen, help me." That's the kind of thing you get when you have a monarchy type thing. You got one person trying to make all the decisions. So we see now.
Seems like that'd be too much.
Yeah, and you think.
How did they do it?
Well, that's the
Like,
thing.
Just like the bomber, he was
Now,
born
whose idea was it for these Hebrews to start having a monarchy? Was it God's idea? Is that their own?
Ways.
There's the people's idea, right? Yeah.
People's
Yeah.
ideas.
Now, you think that's pretty telling about God and His wisdom, why He didn't have this type of system from the get-go? If this would have been the better system, you think He would have had it in place, right?
They just disobeyed him right off.
Yeah, and they said, "No, this is what we want." And God said, "Samuel, tell them everything that comes with having a king and a monarchy. Tell them everything that's going to happen, all of these risks, and the very few rewards. Big risk, little reward, instead of little risk, big reward." And Samuel told them, and then they said, "What?
We still want.
Still want it. Just give it to us." And then Samuel said, "God, these people are crazy. What do they? Do you want me to do it?" And God's like, "Okay, just give it to them." Huh?
It's like Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
It was a
Mm-hmm.
war of tempest and animals. Because he didn't get on his name. So it was.
Very few people can handle power. Very few.
Very few. Yeah.
Just can't handle the pressure.
Oh yeah.
That's all they do.
There's one person, two people actually, in the history of America that I have extreme respect for. I don't know their religious ideas, like I don't know what they claim to be or whatever. But I know some ideas. But there are two people, putting that aside and looking at their accomplishments as people, there are two people that I look back on, as our fellow Americans, that I love the way they handled the pressure, the responsibility, the power that they had. And that's, these two guys, you may even have them in your wallet. They're on the quarter and the penny, the $1 bill and the $5 bill. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. You know why I say that I respect them so much? George Washington, he didn't win every battle. He lost more battles than he won. He lost more men than he ever kept alive. I don't know if y'all know that or not. His track record was horrible. However, he didn't give up. He didn't quit. He didn't tuck tail and run. Sometimes you have to retreat and live to fight another day. Is that type? He lived with that type of mindset. But the reason why I like how he handles power, and I'm saying all this because you brought that up. Very few people. You're exactly right. See, very few people can handle power. George Washington said, he said, "Okay, we won. We're our own country now. This is great. All right, I'm going to go back to my place in Virginia, and I'm just going to live out my days." Knock, knock, knock. They come to his door and say, "Hey, George, we want some guy to lead us. We don't want a king, quote unquote, because that's what we just broke off from. But we need somebody to lead us. Lead who? The country." Can you imagine being like George Washington or his wife in that situation? Just somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, will you lead our country that you just helped win the freedom for?" And he's like, "I don't know if this is a good idea, guys." And then they said, No, just do this just for a short time. Just for a short time. He said, "Okay." Then they voted him in for another term, for another 4-year term, and then they wanted him for more because he was such a good leader. He's the first official president of our United States. And they said, no, we want you to keep leading us. And then what did George Washington, how many years was he in office? 2 terms, right? 8 years. He said, but they wanted him for more. Well, he could have.
Back then, they
He could have.
They could have, but they didn't start that until later.
Yeah. But what did he, and largely the system that we have is due to his refusal to stay in power. Did he chicken out and tuck tail and run because he didn't, or did he crack under the pressure of being a president? No. He was arguably one of the best ones we ever had. I mean, he was the first. He was the standard setter. But he said, no, this is too much power. I don't want people to look back in history. I'm paraphrasing for it. He's like, I don't want people looking back in history and saying I was a tyrant. I don't want anybody looking back in history saying I'm parroting or looking just like mirroring the king that we just broke off from. Now flash forward to Abraham Lincoln, about what, 80 years later, roughly, something like that, maybe 60, something like that. Flash forward to Abraham Lincoln, he was the same type, but instead of having to fight for freedom from another country, what was his big thing that he had to deal with? Slavery and the Civil War. The country was not fighting for it to be its own thing. The country was literally tearing itself apart, and he had to, right here in the middle, he had to.
They had the North and the South fighting,
Mhm.
and that was our
Yeah.
own people.
Yeah. And now, when you remember back to how Abraham Lincoln handled his power, do you guys ever remember him abusing his power? You guys ever remember hearing about Abraham Lincoln misusing it for his own gains? Yeah, he treated everybody equally. He listened to the big states with the big populations, and he listened to the little states too, right? He tried to get everybody to come to the table and work things out. And he didn't, there are certain presidents that use their, what they call elastic claws, where, what does elastic do? Stretches. Where they say, I'm going to sink my claws into this, and then I'm going to stretch. I'm going to stretch this thing out as far as possible. I'm going to lengthen out my power as long as possible. There's some people that do that. But George Washington and Abraham Lincoln are examples of good leaders, just like we see with who have we been reading about? Samuel, David, and at the beginning Saul, but then he abused his power. So go ahead.
Teddy Roosevelt and General MacArthur.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the leadership that they had.
Mm-hmm. Roosevelt was. Yeah.
General MacArthur.
Yeah.
Thought in my lifetime, older soldiers
Yeah.
served on them. I
Mhm.
know about Teddy Roosevelt. Like any movie you see, there's his picture, so I know he was that man.
Yeah.
He was president.
Yeah.
But I hear time after time, old soldiers served on them.
Mhm.
And the word you said, I shall return.
Now,
Great
what?
respect.
Oh yeah. And will history remember people like?
Yeah.
Does history shine or frown upon leaders that were tyrants? Frowns upon. Does history shine or frown upon leaders? It doesn't even have to be a president or a king or anything. It could be a general or an admiral or a leader of some type. Does history shine or frown upon
President
the
Kennedy, he
good
was a war, only war veteran.
Yeah, yeah. And even though he was killed in his, in his prime or whatever, and he made bad decisions in his personal life, but the things that he did with his time as a leader, people rallied around that. People learned from that. History records the events that they did, standing up in the face of adversity when nobody else would. People remember that. And the whole point of all this discussion was there are good leaders and there are bad leaders. good men, good women, bad men, bad women, doesn't matter where they start from. It's what you do with the power when you get it, right? Just like, Frank, you've probably seen, have you coached sports? You've probably seen great kids. Have you ever seen great kids, just really, really polite, wonderful to be around, but then they start getting, have you ever had any, or seen them on other teams where they start getting really talented, they start scoring a lot of points, and have you ever seen the two different reactions? The ones that stay humble and the ones that go off the deep end? Have you seen that? What does that make you feel like when you see that? Right.
Accomplish all that you set out to do. You want to stay
Mm-hmm.
on the whole way.
Why do most teams lose games when they're not supposed to?
Let's get a big hit.
Yeah.
Someone do.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they gonna.
I remember my 9th grade year of high school. Our football team was undefeated. Nobody beat us. Nobody even came close. We ran this play where we called it the wedge. And what does a wedge do? You jam it in there and it pries things open, right? We ran this thing called a wedge where we'd get our guys in like a wall, and then we'd turn it into like a spear tip. And we get the guy with the ball back here. Just imagine this pin as the guy with the ball. We'd get him behind that spear tip, and we just run it straight. This is all people. You know, we run it straight at the other team, and we just pry them open. And by the time the people broke off to block, this guy with the ball just went up the middle and scored every time. Well, why did we lose? Why did we end the season with a loss on our record? We were 9-1. Well, it wasn't because we should have. It wasn't because we should have lost. It was because we had leaders on our team that got big heads. When they started, when we scored so many points that we felt unstoppable, unbeatable, unkillable is what some of the guys said. Nobody untouchable. They started playing different. They started saying, "Well, I don't have to run 100. I don't have to run the ball every single time full speed because I know I'm going to score." Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's like if you only score because you're outrunning everybody, and then you choose to slow down, you're not going to score. That's exactly right. But they got big heads, and they said, "We're going to win. Oh, it's okay." You know.
Overconfident. All we have
Yeah.
to do is
And so you know what ended up happening? These leaders of our team, our starting quarterback, our starting receivers, our starting running back, our defensive linemen, all of these key players, all of our starters, they got suspended by our coach. And I'm so glad that our coach was an upstanding man. He said, "I'm not going to have this riffraff on my team. You guys are going to sit out this game and you're going to watch and then whatever happens." Because see, what they were doing was they were so cocky, they weren't paying attention in class. They were getting in trouble in class. They weren't showing up for practice. Right, and they weren't dedicated. They were getting such big heads, and our coach was trying to calm them down and teach them a lesson. Well, when we went to this team, our coaches didn't think that this other team was going to be. Our coaches thought this was the perfect time to teach our starters a lesson because this other team had not won a single game, and we had not lost a single game. So in the mind of our coaches, okay, we're going to set our guys out and make them learn a lesson while we play a easy team. Well, what ended up happening? They ended up finishing their year 1-9. Their only win was against us. Our only loss was against them. All of our guys, not all, but all of our starters got these big heads, and they just lost it all. It's pretty bad when 115 pounds. He was an actor in the school plays. He was a singer in a band. He was a tiny little guy. He was our backup. He was our third string quarterback. it's pretty bad when our third string quarterback is the only one scoring points in a game, and he's smaller than everyone else, and he didn't score by throwing. He had to run. It's pretty bad. But what does that teach you? It teaches you, when we go back to 1 Samuel, even the small person who believes in the cause can do great things, right? Because Samuel did what? When he believed in their cause. Not Samuel, David. David did what when he believed in their cause, even though he was tiny? He gave 100%. And what was he able to do? He was able to kill Goliath, right? Every time I remember that, every time I think about that series when I was in high school, every single time I think about that year of football, I think of that. I think of Noah Sterling, this tiny little guy who never got playing time, going out there and just running that ball, because he would have thrown it, but none of our receivers were out there, and the only ones that were out there were guys that can't really catch the ball, even if they got open. So, I just think about people who, even if they're winning, they stay humble. Even if they're losing, they stay focused. And then I think of the other side of the coin, and I think about those other people who say, well, we're losing, so I give up. I just quit. I'm done with this. Or the people that are saying that they're losing, so they get angry. I think about when people get power.
Angry, that pulls them down too.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and sometimes people cheat, right? Some people, they just cheat. And if you, last year's Patriots team for the football, they cheated. It's plain and simple. I don't know if anybody in here is a New England Patriots fan or not, but it doesn't matter. A fact is a fact. They broke the rules of football, of the National Football League. But they went on before, it doesn't matter. It's all taken care of now. But does it mean when I 10 years from now, when I'm talking to my son Trey about Super Bowls and about champions of different sports teams and all these things, and I'm trying to teach him life lessons using these things, I'm going to have to look at the year 2015, and I'm going to have to teach him, now son, this is an example of a team that cheated and won everything. Do you think that trophy means the same as this other team who won without cheating? And hopefully, if I do my job right, Trey will tell me, no, Daddy. That's not, huh? It's tainted. It's exactly right. They might as well just put a big old black ink spot on it, right? Or a tar or something.
They didn't deserve it.
Didn't deserve it. Didn't deserve it. I don't care if they're the best. I don't care if they're the best team in the country. If the only way you get to the dance is by cheating, then they call it the Super Bowl dance sometimes. But, then it's not worth it. And that's one thing that I'm really glad that I always had coaches. We were a small team, small school, relatively, and we always had small sports teams. I'm so glad that we had good coaches for the most part that taught us, hey, even when you lose, be humble. Even when you win, be humble. I loved our track coach. Sometimes he would, we would go to meets and we would crush people. And there was a couple of times where guys on our team started getting a big head. You know how our coach handled that? He made the whole team run, whole team, even throwers like shot put and discus. He made everybody run sprints from start to finish every day that week, saying, "You still want to be on this team?"
Don't feel like whooping the other guys.
Oh yeah.
Getting a big head.
Oh yeah. There was one time in football where we actually did that. Yeah, because whenever we made a mistake, every single person on the team would have to run all the way down the field, go around the football goals, the uprights, and then come back. Imagine doing your drills and you mess up 6 times in a row. Yeah, there was a couple people that just refused to listen, and when it came to hitting drills, we hit them a little extra hard. So, but anyway, power, it can corrupt. Now, let's see. let's look at there's 24 chapters in this book, and it's going to go by a lot quicker. This when we go through this book, it's going to go by a lot quicker than the first book. Why? Because we know a lot of the background, right? We don't have to take so much time understanding who each person is, right? Because we know David, we know Michael, we know such and such and such and such. We know some of the things that they've done, right? Now look, we should be able to finish chapter 1 today, and that you guys remember what happened in chapter 31 of 1 Samuel. Who died? Saul and his brothers, and Jonathan and his brothers, right? Who was Jonathan to David? Best friend, yeah, brother-in-law. The Bible says what about these two men's souls? They were like knit together as one, right? They were brothers before they were brothers, you know?
They loved each other before they were
Right.
brother-in-law.
Right. Now, so in this first chapter, we're going to see that David mourns for Saul and Jonathan. Why would he care about Saul? Right. And so, and then from here, before we see David made king, we see him mourning, and then we see him being made king officially, because he's already been anointed, right? Remember when the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul and came to David, and Samuel anointed him. It's a pretty long time to wait to take your throne, your rightful throne, right? But David respectfully declined it several times, right? He didn't want to get it through ill-gotten gains. So now we're going to see him take the throne rightfully. And then we're going to see in chapter 3, we're going to see another war between the house. When I say the house of Saul and the house of David, what does that mean? Family. So, and then Ishbosheth. It's a funny sounding word, but that's a key player here. So we're going to see who Ishbosheth is, and then we'll come back to this outline. But okay, so let's read the first 12. We should be able to knock out chapter 1 today. And it's good that we went back and we talked about this history, and we talked about the setting up for this book. So, okay. So let's read the first several verses here. I'll read verse 1. All right. Now it came to pass, after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had abode 2 days in Ziklag.
And even to pass on the third day, that behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul, with his clothes rent, and earth upon his head. It was so, and so it was when he came to David, that he fell to the earth and did obeys.
David said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he said unto him, Out of the camp of Israel am I escaped.
And David said unto him, How went the matter? I pray thee tell me. And he answered that the people all fled from the battle, and many of the people also were fallen and dead, and Saul and Jonathan his son was dead also.
And David said unto the young man, and told him, He knowest that thou Saul and Jonathan his son be dead.
Let's see. And the young man that told him said, As I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him.
And when he looked behind him, he saw him, and called unto me, and I answered, Here am I.
And he said unto me, Who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite.
And he said unto me again, Stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me, for anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me.
So I stood upon him, and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. I took the crown from upon his his head, bracelet that was on his arm, and brought them hither to my Lord.
Okay. Let's stop here real quick and look back. Anybody see anything interesting about this this right here?
Amalekite claimed credit for killing Saul.
He's a what?
He's an Amalekite.
What did he do?
He said he killed Saul.
Did he?
No,
I don't know.
because it was already told previously that he fell on his own sword.
But did David know that?
No,
So what does David think?
that the Amalekite killed Saul.
Has David had any interesting dealings with Amalekites lately?
Mhm.
Like what?
Like he's went out and fought them,
For what?
because they're enemies of Israel.
Ish. What was the reason that of the most recent battle? Yes, they are enemies, but
Yeah.
they took
He
something,
was
right?
trying to take everything, the spoil,
Oh,
and bring them to
Ziklag.
the king.
They attacked Ziklag.
Right? They burned Ziklag and took the women and children, right? Because all the men were ready for battle, but they didn't go to battle, right? And then they came back, and then they said, "What happened to this place? Where's our wife and kids?" They took our wife and kids, and they tracked them down. That's where they met the slave who told them where it was. And you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Did they kill all the Amalekites there, or did the Bible tell us some of them got away?
Some of them got away on camels.
Right. Now we see here, this Amalekite shows up. He walks up to David. He walks up to him and says, "Hey, I've got the king's crown and I've got the king's bracelet." I mean, what's so special about that? What do we remember when the Philistines came out to the battlefield? When did they and why were they out there on the battlefield after the battle was over? When they found,
Pillaging.
They were pillaging the dead bodies, right? They were looking for jewelry and expensive things that they could use, right? And that's when the Philistines found the bodies of Saul and his family. And what they do with them?
They beheaded them and stuck them to a wall.
Right. What did they not find on his body when they found the body?
The ring and the bracelet and crown.
Okay. So where were they?
The Amalekite had them.
Amalekite took them. Do you think he took them? Does he say that he took them from his body while he was alive or dead?
Dead.
And the Amalekite says, "Yes, Saul begged me. King Saul begged me to kill him." And so, I was just trying to help a guy out. I was just trying to put him out of his misery. I mean, he looked like an animal. I just wanted to put him out of, stop his suffering. This is what, can you imagine him saying that? I mean, that's what he's saying. He's like, he begged me to do it. So when I determined in my heart that he was not going to be able to recover from this, and he needed, something needed to be done. I did this to help him. And then he says he killed him, right? And then he took his stuff to bring back to David as quote unquote proof as to to corroborate his story. What's the problem? Like if somebody were to say, like we got into an accident, if I were to go through an intersection and somebody was to and we were driving next to each other and somebody would run into me, and let's just say I got out and I took pictures, and he got out and he took pictures, and he could try to take his pictures. Let's just say he came over and hit me in my lane. Now, if he were to take pictures and all this other stuff, and let's just pretend I didn't take any pictures. I just let the police pictures do all the talking, or I let his pictures do all the talking. He could bring all the pictures in the world, right? And I could just show up with just my account, right? To most people, even a lot of judges, they're going to say, well, this guy's got evidence and you don't. I could just say, well, let's look at the evidence. let's, and we do this with the Bible all the time. We look at what it says. I could say, hey, okay, he says I caused the accident, but what's interesting, to me at least, is where's all the broken pieces? They're in my lane. There's not any in his. Interesting. And then all of his evidence, quote unquote, that he thought would prove his case, what does that do?
Prove yours.
Yeah, it proved mine. Now it went against him, or it did nothing for him, right? What do we see this guy do when he brings his evidence to corroborate his story? What happens? What is this guy looking for? Is he looking for a pat on the back saying, well done, servant? Likely. But what else is he looking for?
Reward for returning
For enduring this great battle, surviving for the sole purpose of coming to the new king and doing what's right, and bringing the news of the death of the former king, and also he wants to be rewarded for putting a man out of his misery, quote unquote, doing this great service for everyone but himself, right? This is what he's telling David. He's saying, I've done all these things for you and for him and for everyone else. Give me something. Can you imagine that? You guys have all had kids. Have your kids ever come up to you and said, look at all the great things I did, Mom. Look at all the great things I did, Dad. Give me something. Have you ever had that? I mean, do you want to give the kid a reward if he's expecting it?
No.
Not really. I mean, sometimes yes, but not if the kid's doing stuff and lying about it, or doing something he's not supposed to do, and then expecting a reward for it. What's one thing that Samuel said, or David says, is wrong with this guy and with his story? Have we read that yet?
Yeah, I just think I read something. David asked him, how were you not afraid to kill the anointed?
Was that was killing the Lord's anointed frowned upon? I'd say so, because what's the main thing that kept David from doing it all this time?
Then
It was the Lord's anointed. So let me get this straight. We'll just call this guy Jack. Let me get this straight, Jack.
It's like I said.
You just came to me bringing my king's personal crown and jewelry that you took from his dead body. Oh, by the way, he's the Lord's anointed king. I've gone on public record, it's known far and wide that I've refused to kill him myself because he's the Lord's anointed. Under no circumstance have I ever said that this was okay. And you come to me telling me you killed him? What's wrong with you? Are you stupid? That's what I would say. Are you stupid? Like, not in a mean way, but just like trying to get this guy to think.
I know.
Are you that dense?
And David just had one of his men kill him.
Yeah.
Saying he killed the anointed.
Did that guy get the reward he was looking for? No. What does that teach us? What does this occasion right here teach us? Y'all tell me. Y'all do the teaching. Y'all, because we're all studying this together. I'm just the guy standing up here.
It's like that guy turned himself in.
Yeah. For a crime he didn't commit.
Lying.
The guy got killed for doing something he didn't actually do.
And he thought he would get rewarded.
You guys ever heard of those cases here in America where, you know how you got get $50,000 for any help with this case that leads to an arrest, right? You guys have heard of those? You get rewarded for helping the police investigate sometimes. Have you guys ever heard of those cases where somebody calls and they give information just to get the money? They just make up something and they get just to get this reward money. And sometimes it'll lead to somebody that didn't have anything to do with that crime getting arrested. Sometimes people have even been killed in this country because of somebody's, what? False testimony, right? And does God love a false testimony? No. Out of all the things that the Lord sees as an abomination, 3 out of the 7 that are listed, 3 of them have to do with human speech. One of them is a lying tongue, is a false witness. Sorry, I got the hiccups. You guys have heard about these people like this guy who have given false information and then it backfires on them. When the police find out, oh, wow, let's just say the police in this scenario, they believe the person. They say, oh, wow, you must have been there to give us such detailed, graphic information. You must have been there. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We're going to hold you in court we're going to hold you in jail until we figure all this out. There's been cases like that where people lied to try to get money, and then the police believed them, and then they said, okay, we're going to hold you in jail until we figure this out. Sometimes they don't get out of jail.
Just like my lady killed my sister, her dad was a judge and my mom was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
She got off scot-free because my sister was dead, she couldn't testify.
And that's happened. That's happened too. That's happened too. And the big thing that I get out of this is material things worth your life? Yeah. I mean, why would I say that? That's the biggest thing that I get out of this occurrence. Huh? Yeah, but obviously, yeah. But when I say that, when I look at 2 Samuel chapter 1, and I look at this guy, this Amalekite, and I say, to me, the big lesson to learn is don't lie for material things. Like material things are not worth, things or stuff is not worth my life. Like, do you guys get the same thing out of this that I'm getting?
That's like being selfish.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
You're wanting all these.
And greed got him killed, didn't it?
Greed, yeah. They're not yours.
Yeah.
In the real life and workforce, I mean, you've been out of the workforce for a while, I don't know what's going on, but in the workforce and real life and work, did you ever see any people story about their overtime they got?
Like,
Lie about their overtime.
yeah. Oh, all the time.
Okay.
Oh man, I hated when people